Finally, my favourite season of the year has arrived, although you may not have noticed it if you live in the UK. Yes, it's summer. We have some warm weather and it's a great time to be outside. However, this is not such a great time of the year for some people. The idea of a back garden barbecue may be a nightmare for some because, of course, they have hay fever. So with their runny noses and itchy eyes, being outside is not their idea of fun. First of all, let's look at what hay fever is. Essentially, it's an allergy to pollen, and the symptoms include sneezing, having an itchy, runny or congested nose, or believe it or not, all three at the same time, having sore, itchy eyes and a cough. It's basically like you've got a really bad cold, and it can interfere with your sleep and make it hard to concentrate. I personally do not suffer from hay fever, luckily, but in the UK, hay fever is particularly bad. The reason for this is that there are a lot of different plants which pollinate at different times. So in the UK, trees pollinate from late March to mid-May. Then grass pollinates from mid-May to July, and then all other plants and weeds from the end of June to September. So as you can see, that brings us from March till September, but sometimes the season can start early and finish late because of our terrible climate. So you only get about 3 months of the year without hay fever. And when your symptoms start will depend on what type of pollen you're allergic to. So if you're really unlucky and you have all three, I suggest you change countries. So how can you prevent hay fever? So I'm sorry to tell you, but you can't. There is no cure for hay fever, so there's not much hope if you have it. The best thing to do is to avoid the triggers, so stay indoors and don't open your windows of your house. However, the NHS has suggested a very useful tip for those of you who have hay fever. This is to take a tub of Vaseline and rub Vaseline all over your nose, because this will apparently stop the pollen getting in. They also suggest staying indoors with the windows shut when pollen counts are high. I've just mentioned something called the pollen count. Well, let me explain to you what this is. The pollen count is essentially a weather forecast, but for pollen, and it tells you how much pollen will be in the air at what time of the day. And I checked it out, and it seems that the pollen count in the UK is actually more reliable than our weather forecast. If there was only some way we could link the two, perhaps we would actually know what to take with us in the UK, rather than wearing 3 jumpers and an umbrella and all the other layers you can think of. The pollen count is generally highest in the early morning and in the evening at night. So you should avoid going outside during these times, and definitely avoid camping. Another tip that the NHS offers you is to shower and change clothes every time you come back inside from going outdoors, because pollen sticks to your clothes, and wear sunglasses at all times. I'm not sure if that would really help, but I'm sure at least you'll look like you think you're a movie star. Unfortunately though, people who are highly allergic will get severe symptoms of hay fever even if pollen counts are low and they smear Vaseline all over their noses. So we've looked at what hay fever is, but there are actually 2 main problems I would like to discuss very quickly. The first of these is climate change, and the second is pollution, because they both have a very large impact on hay fever. So firstly, let's look at climate change. Obviously, we're all worried about climate change. We all hear about it all the time. But maybe you never thought about how it can affect hay fever. So the way in which it affects hay fever is because of specific plants. There is a plant called the ragweed, which used to be native to America, and this plant has been spreading across Europe since the 1960s. This plant likes Europe because of the climate here, since the climate has changed because of global warming. Our climate has become more temperate, and the plant is finding that the environment is similar to what it used to have in America. And the main problem with this is that by the year 2050, it could have devastating consequences for people who have hay fever, because one single ragweed plant produces over 1 billion grains of pollen every season. So if you imagine that a field gets taken over by ragweed, you can imagine just how much pollen is created, and this could lead to hay fever attacks. I will now conclude my speech by discussing pollution. Everybody knows that pollution has many negative consequences for our planet, but did you know that pollution is actually the cause of hay fever? This is because in our bodies, pollution is trapped. So when you walk out in the street, any particles of pollution in the air we inhale pollution, and the particles are stuck inside our bodies because it's not something that we are able to deal with and get rid of. So all the pollution you inhale in your lifetime is stuck inside of you, and these pollution particles are really sticky. So this means that when you inhale pollen, the pollen gets stuck to the pollution, and the more pollution inside you, the more pollen will get stuck, and the more likely you are to have an allergy to pollen because of the amount of it inside you. This means that if you live in a city, you're actually way more likely to suffer from hay fever because of all the pollution that you've inhaled over your lifetime, which probably seems a bit illogical to you. So for example, I grew up in the countryside, surrounded by plants, surrounded by trees. I lived in front of a forest for over half my life, and I do not have hay fever because I do not have all of the pollution stuck in my body. Therefore, if you want to avoid hay fever, I suggest you go live in the countryside, sniff all the plants, smell the roses, and breathe in all the pollen possible, but not the pollution. Thank you.